Burkina Faso built Africa's longest irrigation canal without a single cent from the IMF, USAID, or EU. No loans, no consultants, no colonial fingerprints, just cement, water, and willpower. Why did Traoré choose water as his weapon? Why build canals instead of signing treaties? Why defy the world when the nation needed help? Because this wasn't just about water. It was about dignity. It was about severing the leash of dependence. It was about declaring war without firing a bullet. And now the world is watching. If you're ready to uncover the story no one else will tell, stay with us. This isn't just a construction project. This is a revolution. According to official reports from Burkina 24 and Faso, in September 2023, the government of Burkina Faso initiated the Ziga 2 irrigation canal project, a massive 43-kilometer artery stretching from the Ziga Dam to the sun-scorched eastern plains. The project's estimated cost, $24 million USD. Its source of funding, 100% internal, $0 from the IMF, 0 grants from USAID, not a single euro from the European Union. Instead, the money came from Burkina Faso's Sovereign Development Fund community cooperatives and the voluntary contributions of local farming syndicates. In a bold speech delivered on-site on April 10, 2024, President Ibrahim Traoré declared, "We do not beg for water. We unite to bring it home." Sovereignty begins when the farmer no longer thirsts. No ribbon-cutting ceremony for Western donors, no PR stunt for foreign diplomats, just shovels in the hands of Burkina workers and a vision uncompromised. But what the international media captured was only the surface, the truth beneath this miracle. It wasn't spontaneous, it wasn't lucky. It was part of a meticulously crafted plan that had been simmering in silence, one Ibrahim Traoré kept hidden, until now, long before the first drop of water flowed through Ziga 2. President Ibrahim Traoré had been waging a war of intelligence, not against a foreign army, but against a decades-old system of engineered dependence. The first step, information. He quietly dispatched a network of agronomic researchers, engineers, and loyal intelligence officers, not to foreign capitals, but into the field's villages and ministry archives. Their mission map. Out why every irrigation plan in the past failed. What they found was damning. More than 72% of prior canal and dam projects had been frozen in bureaucratic limbo. Funds earmarked for construction were redirected through ghost NGOs, invoices bloated by consultants, feasibility studies repeated ad nauseum, all while peasants stared at cracked earth and empty granaries. Behind the scenes, French engineering firms held monopoly contracts, while EU-based agribusinesses reaped the benefits of cheap raw imports. Burkinabe farmers were made tenants on their own soil. That's when Traoré made a decision few before him had dared to burn the donor playbook. He initiated Project Kelegna, an internal code name referencing an ancient Mossi word for river without chains. It was a radical restructuring of agricultural sovereignty. He assembled a covert council of agroeconomist engineers from the Sahel region, irrigation veterans from Cuba and Brazil, and young Burkinabe trained abroad. Their plan was simple but subversive. Use only locally available materials. Employ Burkinabe labor exclusively. Construct a canal at a fraction of the cost. Complete it without a single foreign inspection. Every email, every blueprint, every fund transfer encrypted, compartmentalized, invisible to traditional donor surveillance. This wasn't just construction. It was insurrection, disguised as infrastructure. Traoré's next move was even bolder. He didn't call a press conference. He didn't ask for applause. Instead, he went directly to the people, not the elites in Ouagadougou, but the forgotten farmers of Fatakaya and Tenkodogo. There, under the burning Sahel sun, he held quiet meetings with village chiefs, women's cooperatives, and veteran farmers. He listened. They spoke not of theory, but of wells that ran dry seasons, that shifted seeds that never germinated because fertilizer prices had tripled thanks to European embargoes. Traoré nodded, then made a single promise. "We will not build a canal for you. We will build it with you." And so he began redirecting state funding, not to ministries or foreign contractors, but into community-led procurement units. Each region appointed its own local oversight committee and mobile task forces of engineers moved with the people, not ahead of them. He revived an old Pan-African policy abandoned by previous regimes, pay the worker first. Every laborer was paid at week's end, no bureaucracy. No missing checks. Every trench dug was a paycheck earned. Quietly through backdoor diplomacy, Traoré also reached out to Cuban hydrologists and Brazilian permaculture specialists using encrypted communication routed through Ghana and Togo to avoid foreign monitoring. They weren't brought in for publicity. They worked as silent advisors, helping recalibrate the canal's slope flow control and solar pump optimization. To shield the operation from sabotage or sabotage posing as concern, he passed an executive decree: no foreign NGO shall operate within a 5-kilometer radius of national irrigation infrastructure without military clearance. This wasn't paranoia, it was protection. Ziga 2 wasn't just a construction site, it was a symbol of insurgent self-determination. And Traoré knew if it was to survive, it had to stay hidden until it was too big to stop. But how do you hide a revolution that cuts across 40 kilometers of scorched land? Traoré's answer: decentralized visibility. Instead of pouring resources into one mega-site, the construction was fragmented into mobile microzones, each operating semi-independently. This served two purposes: sabotage one zone, the others carry on. Satellite surveillance. It only sees fragmented activity, not a canal. He deployed military logistics not to intimidate, but to coordinate. Army engineers, long relegated to ceremonial duties or urban repairs, were reassigned to what Traoré now called Operation Nilefire. Each unit carried more than spades and concrete. They brought discipline, precision, and most importantly, loyalty to a commander who had never asked them to fire on their own people. But perhaps his most cunning move came through the Bank of the People. While IMF representatives were still scheduling debt monitoring missions, Traoré launched a national savings campaign framed not as tax, but as future shares in the land. Posters appeared overnight in towns and hamlets. Water flows where unity grows. Invest 1 CFA and your children will harvest 10. And they did. Mothers donated coins, retired miners gave pensions, children brought school meal savings, and within 4 months, the state had raised 1.2 billion CFA francs from the people themselves. It wasn't just capital, it was commitment. When foreign media finally caught wind of the operation, they mocked it. Burkina's Desert Dream read one headline. But Traoré smiled, because by the time the world noticed, Ziga 2 was already halfway built. Solar pumps were humming, earth movers roared, and Burkinabe youth, once destined to beg at embassy gates, were laying pipework by moonlight. Traoré didn't need approval. He needed completion. And every step forward in that silent strategy was one more step away from dependency. It started with a drone image leaked to international media, a thin blue vein slicing across Burkina's parched east, flanked by hundreds of laborers, solar towers, and scaffolding. It wasn't a military buildup. It was something far more dangerous to the global order: self-sufficiency. The West responded as expected, not with bombs, but with briefings. Anonymous experts on TV warned of environmental risks. Think tanks published white papers questioning financial transparency. A flurry of diplomats landed in Ouagadougou with polite smiles and veiled threats. But Traoré didn't flinch. Instead, he invited cameras, not foreign press, but local journalists from Mali, Niger, Togo. They filmed the pumps, the fields, the smiling workers. Then came the declaration broadcast live: Burkina Faso will complete Ziga 2 without a single Eurofranc or dollar from institutions that once held us hostage. We are no longer asking for help. We are commanding our future. It was the spark. Within 72 hours, tens of thousands poured into the streets of Ouagadougou and Bobo-Dioulasso, not in protest, but in celebration. Farmers marched with shovels raised like flags. Children painted canals in chalk on sidewalks. University students projected Traoré's speech onto dorm walls. From beyond the borders, other Sahelian nations watched, closely. Chad's civil society released a joint statement calling Traoré a mirror of what is possible. Malian broadcasters dubbed the canal Africa's real peace pipeline. And then came the sanctions. The European Union, under pressure from agribusiness lobbyists, imposed a freeze on equipment exports to Burkina Faso, claiming infrastructural irregularities. Their hope: to choke the final mile of the canal. But Traoré had foreseen it. Weeks earlier, he had signed emergency supply contracts with Turkish and Indian manufacturers who airlifted components into Niger and routed them via military escorts through the Sahel corridor. Burkina Faso was not building in ignorance, it was building in defiance. And with every meter of concrete poured, the cracks in the old colonial system grew wider, the retaliation escalated. An anonymous IMF memo was leaked, suggesting Burkina Faso would face long-term consequences for bypassing traditional funding mechanisms. Major news outlets suddenly ran stories questioning Traoré's legitimacy, his militarized administration, his populist nationalism. But on the ground, the people didn't flinch. If anything, the attacks only deepened their loyalty. Farmers began carving mini irrigation ditches parallel to the canal, creating a fractal of independence stretching across provinces. Artists painted murals of water flowing from Traoré's outstretched hand. Village elders renamed schools roads, even babies, Ziga Souverain Kenefo, water sovereign freedom. The revolution wasn't just logistical, it was spiritual, and Traoré knew the final blow had to be more than symbolism. On July 5th, he signed Decree 144A, officially nationalizing all major water infrastructure assets in the country, including previously foreign-owned dams and purification plants. The crowd outside the presidential palace erupted in chants. Not one more drop for Paris. Our rivers are not your stock exchange. Foreign ambassadors protested, some were expelled. An EU water consulting firm was shut down overnight. When the World Bank offered technical support, Traoré's cabinet replied with a single phrase, "We no longer outsource our dignity." And then came the document. It was leaked anonymously, a 58-page internal audit from 2017, revealing that over 60% of Burkina Faso's water systems were previously under indirect control of French subsidiaries masked behind local names. The audit showed price markups of up to 400% maintenance delays that spanned years and a clause in one agreement that allowed the French company to own rainfall runoff data. The people were stunned, but not surprised. They turned their anger into action. A National Water Liberation Day was declared. Thousands volunteered to inspect, repair, and relabel pipelines, erasing decades of foreign branding. Burkina Faso was not just reclaiming water, it was draining the colonial residue buried beneath every pipe, every pump, every drop. The uprising had found its channel. Inside the Parliament Hall, the tension was thick enough to choke on. A national broadcast had been declared, no foreign media invited, no translation feed provided. Just Burkinabe eyes watching Burkinabe truths be spoken aloud for the first time in a generation. President Ibrahim Traoré walked in flanked not by soldiers, but by farmers. Women with cracked hands, men with dust on their boots, young graduates who had traded diplomas for irrigation maps. He stood before the council. His voice was clear, cold. He wasn't delivering a speech. He was reading a verdict. For decades, he began, we believed the enemy was drought. But we now understand the drought was not of nature. It was manufactured neglect. The irrigation projects that failed were meant to. The seeds that never sprouted were designed that way. Hunger was profitable. A silence swept the chamber. He held up a contract, signed in 2009, between the former regime and a European consortium. It gave them 75% ownership of all hydrological decision rights in the east and north. A clause explicitly forbade independent canal construction without prior consent of donor oversight. This wasn't corruption, this was legalized captivity. Then came the testimonies, whistleblowers, former ministry officials, agricultural engineers once silenced by bureaucracy. Each told the same story, that Burkina Faso's food crisis had been intentionally prolonged to keep aid money flowing, to keep dependency alive, to keep the West indispensable. When the testimonies ended, the room stood still. No judge needed, no jury summoned. Traoré looked into the camera and asked, "Who feeds us? Who decides when we eat? And why must our children's stomachs negotiate with Paris or Brussels?" The trial was over. The reckoning had begun. The revelations detonated across the country like thunderclaps. Markets froze. Opposition leaders fell silent. Social media, usually flooded with gossip, or music videos, became a digital battlefield of documents, testimonies, and fury. And in the center of it all stood a man not afraid to name names. Traoré released a public blacklist. Not only former ministers, but international NGOs, foreign agri-tech firms, and Western contractors appeared on it. Each line came with proof: unfulfilled irrigation projects, rigged procurement schemes, emergency food shipments laced with genetically locked seeds requiring annual purchases. Then he did the unthinkable. He summoned Burkina Faso's ambassadors from France, the Netherlands, and the EU Commission, not for consultation, but for repatriation. He cut all remaining agricultural aid negotiations, redirected those funds into sovereign food cooperatives, and froze foreign land leases issued under past governments. A panel of farmers, not economists, was appointed to revise Burkina Faso's national food policy. The president delivered one more decree: no policy is legitimate unless its roots touch the soil. From today, no farm shall be governed from glass towers. The harvest is the new constitution. That night, tens of thousands gathered in Ouagadougou's Independence Square. They did not come to celebrate. They came to witness. Candles flickered. Children held signs, "Water is our right." Traoré feeds, others feasted. And from the rooftop of the Ministry of Agriculture, a projection lit up the sky. Not a flag, not a face, but a single defiant phrase. "We will never kneel for grain again." The world saw a revolution not of arms, but of almonds, onions, and water lines. The final blow came not from a protest, but from a ledger. Traoré's Ministry of National Audits, an obscure department once buried under red tape, released a 400-page report, Food Chains of Control: How the West Profited from Our Hunger. It detailed 2 decades of exploitative partnerships, the contracts, consultancy fees, and technical assistance that funneled billions in local revenue back to European and American firms. In one example, a single Dutch NGO had billed over $22 million to advise on seed selection, yet only delivered one hybrid strain, which failed in arid conditions and was patented in Europe. But this wasn't just a document drop. It was a national mirror. The report included names of Burkinabe officials, media commentators, and even celebrity influencers who accepted awareness grants to promote food aid dependency. Burkina Faso stared at its own shadow and did not flinch. Instead, Traoré issued his final judgment not to court, but to the nation justice. He said standing beneath a lone baobab tree in Boucle du Mouhoun does not only mean trials or prisons, it means restoration. If they poisoned our wells with false hope, we will now drink from rivers we build ourselves. The soil was dry beneath his boots, but the canal now ran within sight. A grandmother in the crowd whispered, "He is watering our dignity." With no gavel, no robe, and no armed guard, Traoré declared, "We will not wait for permission to feed ourselves. We will not wait for pity to irrigate our land." And then he turned to the youth. "The court has spoken, but the verdict will only be written in the harvest. If you believe truth deserves a voice, leave a word for Africa in the comments below." Just as the dust seemed to settle, a shadow from within shifted the winds of the revolution. A name long presumed loyal appeared in the audit footnotes: Colonel Bassirou Douamba, former logistics chief for the Canal Project war hero and Traoré's childhood comrade. It was a name engraved in trust until now. The report showed misdirected materials, inflated costs, and quiet meetings with foreign embassy officials behind closed gates. The country reeled. How could someone who once fought beside Traoré betray the very soil they bled for? But then just as quickly came a twist that none, not even Traoré, had seen coming. Colonel Douamba appeared voluntarily before the public tribunal. In front of 20,000 in Waihiguya Stadium, he took the microphone and said, "I did not betray my country. I played the game to learn its rules. I gave them what they wanted: fake reports, false hope, illusion of control. But I never gave them the heart of this revolution." He then produced a USB drive. Not just data, but evidence: audio files, emails, satellite coordinates. Proof that several Western agribusiness lobbies were planning to disrupt the Ziga 2 canal through economic sabotage disguised as climate concern. Traoré stepped forward, eyes like fire meeting stone. "You walked a dangerous line, Bassirou. To protect the roots, one must sometimes dance with the termites," the colonel replied. The crowd exploded, not in outrage, but in roaring applause. A traitor had returned, not fallen, but forged. With Colonel Douamba's evidence unlocked, the entire landscape of Africa's agricultural war map shifted. Inside the files was not just interference against Burkina Faso, but a regional blueprint. Multinational food conglomerates backed by Western lobbying firms had built what they called the Agri-Hold Matrix, a cartel-like structure controlling seed patents, fertilizer supply, and trade routes across the Sahel. Their goal: prevent any single African nation from achieving food sovereignty. Their weapon: manufactured scarcity and dependency. The Ziga II Canal had become too successful, too symbolic, too contagious. If Burkina Faso proved it could irrigate independence without a single cent from the IMF or EU, the dominoes would fall across Mali, Niger, Togo, and even Chad. So plans were in motion. Flood local media with ecological concerns about the canal's design. Fund protests against unsustainable practices through shell NGOs. Trigger border delays and customs disruptions through diplomatic channels. And worst of all, sabotage water pumps with faulty parts disguised as aid donations. The revelation shattered illusions. These weren't just supply chains, they were shackles. Traoré didn't waste a moment. He summoned emergency ministers, sealed the border to all foreign NGO shipments pending inspection, and announced a new doctrine. From today, no foreign hand may dictate how Burkina Faso drinks, eats, or plants. We will dig with our own shovels, build with our own steel, and defend with our own hands. But then came the second twist, not from the West, but from the East. In a surprise diplomatic broadcast streamed across Pan-African networks, the president of Algeria delivered a short but thunderous message. To those who wish to see Burkina Faso starve, Algeria offers grain pumps and engineers no strings attached. From this day, the Bama Canal is not a Burkina Faso project. It is a project of the Sahel. Shock rippled through diplomatic circles. Algeria, once neutral, had just chosen a side. And with it, broke the Western monopoly on narrative and aid. Within a week, equipment from Algiers and training units from Tunisia and Egypt arrived quietly in the provinces. No press releases, no donor banners, no logos, just silent cooperation. The African axis of sovereignty, long a dream, was taking form. Inspired by this shift, South Africa's Green Energy Ministry pledged 1,000 solar irrigation kits. Ethiopia offered seed-sharing accords. Even Madagascar, half a continent away, sent its top agricultural soil scientists. Burkina Faso had sparked a silent union, born not in treaties, but trenches. And most transformative of all, the African Union, under pressure from public outcry, called an emergency session to debate food sovereignty as a continental right, not a national luxury. For the first time in decades, the tide wasn't flowing from Paris or Washington. It was flowing inward from African soil to African soul. A canal had cracked more than just the ground. It had split the old order wide open. And in the center stood a man silent, focused, unshaken, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. The Bama Canal now sings with life. Children chase water along its banks. Women harvest vegetables from soil once declared infertile. Old men who once prayed for rain now walk between rice fields, their hands wet with proof that prophecy is man-made. Burkina Faso has not just survived, it has risen. The economy is no longer anchored in foreign markets, but in the calloused hands of farmers, welders, and engineers who built their own revolution one drop at a time. In a final address broadcast beneath a rising Sahel sun, President Ibrahim Traoré stood before a wall of seedlings and declared, "We do not ask permission to be free. We do not wait for rain from colonial skies. We build, we grow, we rise. And we do it ourselves." Across the continent, eyes filled with hope. Across the ocean, empires held their breath. Because Burkina Faso had proven one terrifying truth to the old world: Africa doesn't need saving. Africa needs sovereignty. If the spirit of Ibrahim Traoré touched your heart, share this story. Subscribe to follow the journey of a defiant Africa no longer kneeling. May God bless this land and all of Africa.